probably about a year and a half into residency, I was able to had Googled around a little bit on the white coat investor and saw some refinancing info. So I found a couple good, rates there to refinance, and even came across a startup company called Link Capital, and I know they're still doing some stuff. And they were like a startup, and I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And they were like one of the first companies to do like a standard $100 a month payment, no matter how much you owed. So I ended up refinancing. I think it was probably a year or even two before SoFi. I tried to refi through SoFi, and they turned me down. They were like, no, we're not really doing medical student loans yet. And I was like, what? And they had done some people's. Yeah, I was just thinking like, holy smokes, these Link Capital guys haven't made, because there was like DRB, Daring Rowington Bank. Yep. And there was another random one, like a smaller bank. I want to say not Common Bond, but there was another one kind of like that.
They were one of the earlier ones.
Anyways, there was a couple small banks that was kind of niche. They were doing this, and I think they were brilliant because we're such a reliable group, and we can't bankrupt the loans anyway. So it's a great thing to be doing. Anyways, I refinanced down to like 4.25 or something. I think my first or second year, and to me, it just seemed like a no-brainer. And I was in ophthalmology and had no intention of trying to spend 10 years picking certain jobs just because I wanted to like get, a certain amount of money paid back by the government.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you. Why?
I thought about it.
Into the details, but why not PSLF? Why not stick to the federal?
Right. Part of it was I don't have like the most faith in the government to stick to what it says, because it tends to change its mind. So I didn't see it as the most reliable deal maker in the scenario. Mm-hmm. I felt like I could trust myself and invest in myself and my ability to negotiate and find good jobs better than I could trust them to pay my loans 10 years later. And the more they grow, the larger they be, the less they would want to pay them back, is kind of what I thought. And then the more likely they'd try to push some sort of cost of that back on me, which it looks like they would. It would be, a decent amount of taxes you'd have to pay on that because it's considered income. So I still feel very good about that decision. And everybody does it differently. I think it's totally reasonable if you're doing that job. But anyways, I was looking at private practice, and a lot of most ophthalmologists are private practice. So I figured the sooner I refied, even if I'm turning down that one option, it was kind of the only thing I was turning down. And then I was guaranteeing saving somewhere between like $10,000 and $30,000 just by refinancing. Right. Okay. And then I also had extra spending money because I was actually paying on some of my loan when I refied. So I just decided I would put it off, which looking back on it, I probably spent most of that money on restaurants. And
but you would have been a smart move too. Yeah, it's hard to say.
To pay it. It's fine. Like, honestly, I think I said last week, a lot of what you do in residency in terms of paying off your loans is a drop in the bucket, but refinancing is probably, if you're not going to do some sort of government attempted payoff thing at a nonprofit hospital, then it's such a no-brainer. And I'm so glad that I did it. And it's easy too. It's easy. They don't charge you anything. I thought, oh, maybe they'll charge me like some sort of fee, like, when you take out a loan on a house, and maybe they charge you $1,000 just from the start. Just cash up front. And these refinance companies, they usually give you $300 to $700 just for graciously letting them buy your loan from somebody else, because it's free money for them. It's guaranteed. We're always going to pay off back our loans. So
and there's a lot of stuff there. You're right. 6.8% is the national average, still is, I think. And that happened probably back in 2008, 2009. Yeah. When was med school for you? Would that have been?
I was 2010 to 14. I'm pretty sure there was only 4 years where it was 6.8% the whole time.
Yeah.
4 years in a row. And those are the 4 years that I was in med school.
Uh-huh.
If I remember correctly, I'm almost sure that it was still high. I think it was 6.6 the couple years before, but like right when I was in med school, or at least finishing college, I hit every single year of the highest percentage loans from the government ever. If you look back, it used to be like 2 to 3.
It did. And that's what I was going to say. When we started doing this whole resident workshop curriculum, that most of the residents, refinancing was not a thing, because student loans are so stinking cheap at 1% to 3% that I've still got some clients that are attendings now in their late 30s, early 40s or more that have
That's
student
right.
loans, but our suggestion was like, man, take as long as you can to pay that sucker off because that's
Yeah,
cheap
those are
money.
amazing. Yeah.
And yeah, so I just had the conversation with one that's probably 44. He's a pathologist, and he was talking about we've kind of hit a lot of other goals, and student loans is his other thing. He's like, oh, I want to get them paid off. I'm like, dude, you got like 1.5% to 2% interest. Please don't. Like, I know you want to, and I know it feels good and just all that stuff. Emotionally, sure, I get it. Financially and numbers wise, no, just don't. I mean, if you just look at it from strictly an interest rate standpoint, like if you had $1,000, would you put it in something that pays off a 2% loan or an investment that could get you 8%? And I have to hear the argument from people, well, sure, but that 2% is a sure thing. Okay, fair. So then if we did a, risk adjusted, we can go into all that stuff. But yeah, that's kind of the simplest way of putting it. Like you said as well, the PSLF thing, the public service loan forgiveness, I get that question pretty much every single lecture that I do. And it's should I plan on PSLF? What do you think about PSLF? Is it going to be around? Is it legit? Blah, blah, blah. I've heard this. I've heard this. And I get this one all the time. Have you ever had anybody that's gotten forgiven?
Oh yeah.
And no, I haven't yet. Heard of, seen articles, whatever, but we've got hundreds of physician clients and we haven't had anybody that's gotten loans forgiven yet. The good chunk of them, I'm with you, Trevor. If anybody has like even just any doubts, or even if they're in a nonprofit or a, government job, if they have any doubts, I say take the sure thing, get the refinance, get a low rate now, because here's how I typically explain it in my lectures is, okay, you got a 6.8% loan now. You refinance, especially these days, geez, rates are so low. But let's say you get a 4%, okay? And you get that and you're like, no, I'm going to stick with my federal loan because the PSLF. Okay, I get it. So then they are working down this road on a 10-year payment schedule, and then the rest is going to get forgiven after that. But then what if at year 9.5, something drastic changes in Congress or the government, they change their minds or whatever? They can do that, right? Some may say, well, there'd be a class action lawsuit, blah, blah, blah. Okay, maybe. But let's just say something happens and maybe they put an income cap on it, or they put a cap on how much is forgiven, whatever. Then you're like, okay, well, that's all right. I'm just going to go refinance now. And what's happened over the next 10 years, or over those 10 years, what's happened to interest rates?
Exactly.
They've gone up, and now, sure, you could refinance for 7% or 8%. And now you're like, shoot, I guess I'll just stick with these loans. And I should have refinanced 10 years ago.